Welcome to this special edition of the SoccerWire Podcast. I'm Marc Serber, and alongside me is SoccerWire founder Chris Hummer, SoccerWire Managing Editor Quinn Casteel, our producer extraordinaire Bridget Baker, and of course the one and only Charles Bohm from Major League Soccer, as well as SoccerWire is here with us. We are also joined by a very special guest, SoccerViza owner Joe Funicello. Joe, thank you so much for coming on here today. Really excited to have you with us. And let's get started with your career because, you're one of those players who were kind of on the traditional path that's been built by U.S. Soccer over the years, got derailed a bit, and then you still were able to find your way to a very, very successful career. And so you started playing with the New York Red Bulls with their development team kind of right before, if I'm not mistaken, the Development Academy came into play. Actually won the Super Y League with the New York Red Bulls at the U20 level, but then, didn't actually make the jump from the U20 side to the professional team and started going around to combines trying to make it. And at one combine, you actually talked to a guy who turned out to be a fake agent who took you to England. And from there, you were sleeping on somebody's couch in Hackney, where if you know London, that's not the place you want to be in London, but you made your way there. You played in the 6th division with a team called Corinthians Casuals. Then you came back. You played in USL2 for free. Let me say that again. You played for free in USL2, a professional league, and you were playing for free. But from there, you were able to make your way to the Icelandic 1st division and then to Finland as well, where you actually not only had great success there, but then went back to Iceland and played with Dora Kiri in the Europa League qualifiers, where you guys almost made it all the way to the group stages. And of course, from there, you've gone on to be a coach not only here in the U.S., but also the 1st division in Iceland and coaches abroad. There are very few Americans who've coached and had the kind of success that you've had abroad. And now you're back here with SoccerViza. So if I'm correct, is there anything that I missed or anything else you want to fill us in on?
No, I mean, you pretty much went A to Z there. So thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. And one of the reasons we want to have you on the show is, we talk about SoccerViza and what you've been able to do. And we kind of want to know, first of all, before we get into what you're doing with SoccerViza, what are your thoughts on the current landscape of youth soccer today? What do you think is working and what needs to be changed? And the reason I'm asking you this first, before I ask about your work with SoccerViza, is I feel that what you're about to say really is going to go a lot into why you decided to start SoccerViza in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't want to sound like a anti-U.S. soccer guy because I've been able to kind of work in the soccer system from the real youth level, all the way into the professional game. And I get to work with a lot of clubs, MLS clubs to USL clubs to teams in Europe at the lower levels and higher levels. And I get to be around the whole industry. And I don't think the landscape is, a lot of people say it's broken, pay to play, it's this and that. Because I'm so and it is a game of opinions, and I say that all the time, but I don't think the system's broken. I just think America has this culture that we've kind of created over the 100 years or whatever, how many years you want, about the game of soccer that is so much different than the rest of the world. I mean, to go into detail on what I think needs to be different is I just think we need to do a better job at identifying talent. I don't think we need to single ourselves out to USDA or these colleges. The country is so big, and if U.S. soccer could step away from being mama or papa bear and just be its own standalone and have a system that just picks the best players, I think we'd be on a better road. And again, that's my opinion. I just, there's so many talented players around this country that don't get a proper look, and it's not because of the pay to play, just because we fail to scout properly. And that's my opinion on that. You know what I mean? A lot of people say pay to play is the problem. Is it though? Because it is a business. It is an industry. I'll give you an example. Let's say in Europe, the top clubs who are selling the top players every year, they're selling these youth players for millions of dollars. And the coaches in those top organizations, they barely make ends meet. I mean, and there's some of the top clubs in the world that sell players. So is it fair that a coach gets paid so low as a youth team coach, but creates an environment and develops and kind of puts his arm around players, and then the club goes to sell him for millions, and the coach can barely pay his rent? So the pay to play is how it's all how you look at it. But I think we could do a better job at scouting.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you because I feel like when so many people talk about whatever they feel is wrong with U.S. soccer, they act like everything is right with the rest of the world. And so you're kind of one of the first people who give us this insight that, look, there are problems in other youth systems across the world. But, I kind of want to know how your experience and how everything you just said to us led you to finding and founding SoccerViza. Kind of want to know what you were motivated by, what you were seeing in terms of the pathways laid out by youth soccer in the U.S. or by that lack of scouting that you said you were seeing, and also by kind of your own path that you took and your own experiences as a player.
Yeah, I mean, I just growing up, even playing I remember when I was growing up, ODP was real big, and we used to go to like national team camp or regional camp, and the best players would always be, they would label the fields 1 through 7, and the best players would always be on field 1, and then it would gradually get lower. And every year, no matter how hard we worked, it felt like the players on field 1 were already on field 1. And it was like you could have a great 3 days at ODP's ID camp, but there was just no chance of getting in there. So that's kind of where it really started when I was real young, and I realized, wow, this is kind of political, or maybe it's not even that it's political. It's just they're so close-minded to this one set of players or these types of players, and there's players out there, and taking me out of the conclusion, there are guys on other fields that were really talented that maybe just couldn't get a sniff, And when I ended up being a pretty good high school player in the state of Connecticut, and I knew Giovanni Savarese. And I went into the Metro Stars first team training. He invited me in, and I learned a lot about the political side at 18 years old, training with the Metro Stars first team and then being brought down to the U20 team. So when I actually ended up having an okay career, I mean, I didn't have an amazing career. It was good. I did a lot from where I came from. I wanted to try to change U.S. soccer as much as I could, or put a dent in it to identify players who are talented, who never get a chance, but also to educate them, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. And I've actually, I should say that we're friends going all the way back to Real, Maryland, when you weren't getting paid to be probably the best player on the field in the majority of the games. And I don't know if you know this, but I wasn't getting paid either to do the color commentary. So kind of, something about soccer, but that's, the way you've got to work your way up. And it's a labor of love, and it's something that we do despite that fact. But, the one thing I want to ask you before I let the other guys here in the studio jump in, because I know they're chomping at the bit, but I want to know how many players have gone on to have trials or signed with professional teams from SoccerViza, just because, I kind of know the number, but I think that it's important that people know so they understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, so in the last 6 years, we helped over 300 players either sign professional contracts or go on trial, and that's all levels. I mean, you look at Aaron Walker, went on to sign for FC Cincinnati. You got Sean Reynolds, who was at Louisville City, was just recently at St. Louis. He was working at Home Depot. And then we've got players like Miguel Bustos and Jonathan Firmino, who went from our combine straight to the Portuguese Premier League U23 team of Vitória. So all different levels, even lower leagues in Australia and Iceland. So I'm not telling guys they're going to go on and play for Manchester United. What we want to do is just create an entrance into the game and kind of educate them on how their career should go or could go, because they're not all going to be millionaires, you know what I mean? Or 98% of them are not, but they want to continue doing something they love. So to answer your question, 300 players in the last 6 years.
Not bad. All right, Charles, go ahead and jump in.
Hey, Joe, this is Charlie Bohm. It's a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for your time. And I have anybody who looks at your resume, I mean, again, we like you were saying, Mark, some people criticize from their keyboard. Others have lived it. And I just want to read off some of the clubs. Your resume is like a graveyard of American soccer's past. You look like you were on the grind. I mean, you mentioned the Metro Stars, Brooklyn Knights, Atlanta Silverbacks, Real Maryland Monarchs. I mean, you've seen it. You've seen the chaos.
Yeah, it's great. It's cool to see how it's changed a lot since like the MetroStar days. How much the landscape has changed, or what direction it's going in. It's crazy.
And you played with a teenage Michael Bradley, I believe. Did y'all's paths cross to the MetroStars?
Yep, Josie, Michael Bradley. Who else was on that team? Jork AF was there. Mondo Guerrero was there. It was pretty cool. I mean, I trained more with the reserves in the U20, but I got called up to first team trainings, and it was pretty cool.
If I remember right, from what I'm told, MetroStars were trying to do a youth system before there was a youth system in MLS in terms of identifying local talent.
Yes, they definitely were. So that year when I went on, we were still the MetroStars, but Red Bulls came in through that summer and acquired the MetroStars. But we had a youth team, and we used to go down and play in like the Super Y League, and DC United had one too, I believe. And because we played DC United in the semifinals, and there was like Mike Grello was on my team and Jonathan Barajo. So they were trying to do the youth system, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember the early days of DC United. I'm sorry, Charles, but I have to say this because I was trying to get in with that team, and I knew I had absolutely no chance when I showed up to training one day, and the coach looked at me and said, "Oh, hello, my rotund one." And I thought, well, that's that. I'm going back to Chipotle. But anyways, sorry, go ahead, Charles.
And I'm really curious to hear maybe a little bit of a snapshot from you, or however you want to approach how you've taken your experiences and skill set and put them to use in a scouting perspective. Because I believe you do scouting for multiple clubs overseas, right?
Yeah, so I learned a lot because when I first started, I went into what I thought was a good player and how a good player. I mean, I still have my my criteria, what I think a good player is. But what I learned is you have to understand that it's a game of opinions, and different coaches have different ways to play the games, and different countries have different types of ways to play the game. So you've got to try to find a player that fits that club or that coach or that country's criteria and also culture. So it's not just about scouting the top players. Like, I can't send a really skilled player to Iceland unless I know the coach is going to use him to his best ability. I probably have to send more of an athlete or someone that can is used to the physical side of the game. So I've learned the different criteria of different countries and coaches. You know what I mean?
Are we as the United States developmentally, are we producing a full spectrum of players, and the ones on the creative spectrum just aren't necessarily getting spotted and elevated and cultivated, or are we chronically not producing the full variety that we should be?
That's a great question. I think it's both. I think we do have some top talent here. I just don't think we look at them right, and I also think that some of the coaches that are coaching at the highest level, there's better coaches out there, but that's my opinion. Yeah, I mean, listen, and I can talk about the U.S. national team a little bit, but I feel like there needs to be a change in the way we play. And, like, for example, I hate to use names, but use
names.
So, like, Josie Altidore, he's done really well in MLS. He's done well in his career, but U.S. hasn't done well in terms of being a national team. So what do? We bring in the Jordan Morris, who's very similar to Josie, and it's like, you got guys like Bobby Wood, and this is great because I love these topics. You got a guy like Bobby Wood who's hungry, who's fighting through the trying to make his career. He's hungry, and when he's come on, he's made an impact. But we seem to go the same Josie, Jordan, Moore's criteria, where they're big, strong. Like, if that makes any sense, I think we're scouting the American way, and I think we need to be more open to just scouting in more avenues and different type of players and see what works. Here's something I always thought of. So like Patrice Evra or Payet or these guys who played for the French national team, these guys started off in these lower leagues, right? And they made a great career for themselves. But what I'm trying to say is, when you start off in these lower leagues, you got to be hungry to get out of there. It's a jungle, and it's so difficult to get out of there. So they know what hunger feels like. They weren't babied by these top college programs that have better facilities than most of the professional teams out there. So when it's an ugly moment in a game, or they're not doing well, or they're being tested mentally, because of where they came from, these lower divisions and the harsh reality of soccer everywhere else, they have that fight in them that you really can't coach, or that you can't create unless you create it yourselves. And I think in American soccer, you could play for a youth club that has better facilities than some of the professional clubs elsewhere. You know what I mean? So I think overall we just gotta look at it differently.
And this is, I think, maybe my last one, at least for now. You've worked with Querétaro, right, from Liga MX, and I'm curious as to if you can give us any insight into what they do, because I know they have a pretty active academy, and of course the Mexican clubs are always looking for dual national kids and talented Latino kids that can bring south. I'm wondering what observations maybe you took from that.
They're just open to everything. It's not like they're arrogant about it, and I feel like a lot of the clubs I work with in the U.S. and I say, and I'm okay with saying that, I don't mind, that they're just really closed-minded to what they're looking for. When you go to like work with Querétaro or Pachuca or teams elsewhere, they're just looking at talent. They don't care about the school or where they played. They just want to see how they impact, like how do they impact the game and could they impact their team. And I'll tell you a funny story. I was in Dallas, and we had a combine there, and I was working with a Portuguese club, and there was a kid from inner city Chicago there, and what a player he was. And there was another kid from Notre Dame there, and he was a good player as well. And the Portuguese scout turns to an MLS team and says, "Hey, says this inner city kid, he's really good. I mean, we've loaned players out to like USL and they were MLS, and I know he can play in that level. Why don't you take him?" And he goes, No. He goes, "He's good, but look at this guy. He's played at Notre Dame. He has a lot more experience." And the Portuguese scout turns to us, and we were having dinner, and he goes, "I didn't know the church had a team. Like, are they taking him just because he went to a church school?" So you can see, and he was that serious about it, So you can see, like, there's a certain criteria you have to meet in U.S. soccer to really be taken seriously.
They were trying to understand our culture, our soccer culture, and struggling.
Exactly.
Well, Joe, let me ask you this. As somebody who does understand other cultures and the way things are done differently in other countries, why is it that we as American soccer fans, soccer observers, we always say, oh, we should be more like this. We got to compete with the best European teams. And yet when it comes time to realize that we as America aren't doing something right and somebody suggests we do something that another country is doing because they might be doing it better, then why do we all of a sudden go and say, oh, no, that's not American. We shouldn't do that?
I think because people are scared to change, really scared to change. And I think in the federation or wherever, change is hard. And to really change, it takes – you need someone to come in there who's confident, who is not scared of the backlash, and really be good at changing the whole mindset of the federation and creating a team that wants to succeed and not having individuals in there with opinions. You need someone that goes in there and says, guys, this is our goal. Let's do it all together and really be a leader and be good at it. I think that, and hopefully that's the only way, not the only way, but I think that's how it's going to change,
Quinn?
Joe, first of all, I want to say free Bobby Wood.
I'm with you, my man. I'm with you.
I feel like the last time I saw him, he was on a milk carton or something. Dude, he's just missing.
But he did well in I forget what game it was, what tournament it was. And then we never saw him again. And I was like, this guy, maybe he's not the highest level, but he shows that he wants to be out there, And I think that's the first step,
Definitely. I like watching him play, and I think he's got a great, energy to him for sure. So, and that's kind of on a somewhat related note. I just wanted to go back to what you were saying earlier about your experience growing up with ODP, where you're coming up and you couldn't, it seemed like whatever you did, you couldn't get on that first field. And I feel like there's a lot of issues like that nowadays with just the scouting system as a whole in the U.S. And you mentioned how, certain players seem to be scouted and sometimes there's political reasons. But I wanted to know, is there a specific type of player that you think gets scouted while is there another kind of type of player that you see most often getting neglected?
So do you mean by us here in America or do you mean worldwide?
Specifically in America.
Yeah, the athlete. The athlete is still strong. The guy, like the center backs or the strikers that are big get scouted here in America a lot more. The guys that can go up and contribute to the athletic part of the game. I think the play, like there was a player named Matt Nigro who I signed in Iceland when I was named head coach of IF Vestry, and he's from Jersey. to this day, I've played professionally. We had guys on loan from Atletico Madrid when I played for EFCO Mariehamn. And to this day, he is one of the most technically gifted players that can change a game with a simple pass that I've ever come in contact with. And he did so well for me, and he was named MPSL Player of the Year. I think he won the Golden Boot. And he went on so many USL and MLS trials, and I played at that level with guys that, good players, and he's right up there, and he couldn't even get a sniff. But they turn around and sign a guy that doesn't have that same impact in changing the game, but is an athlete that can go up and win a header or add to the game that way. So, yeah, I think we scout more athletes.
Can I ask a follow-up there? One of the things it seems like is one of the trickiest jobs, especially for a national team coach, but different talent evaluators have to do it in different settings, is measuring multiple players in multiple competitions at multiple levels. So if you mentioned Bobby Wood, I think he's in the Zweite Bundesliga right now, second tier in Germany. We've got MLS players. Let's look at the men's national team pool. We've got possibly youth national team players who are on reserve teams at various clubs in Europe. And then one defender in the championship, another in the Mexican First Division, and so forth. How do you sort of control for so much diversity in the level that your players are at?
What do you mean? So how do you control? Like, you mean the different styles? Like,
no, like for example, if you're looking at let's say in a hypothetical situation as an evaluator, you're trying to decide who you're going to recommend. Two players in different competitions, whether it's youth or first team. How do you measure how they're going to translate to the next level up?
I think you have to have an idea and an identity on how you want to play, or an idea to how you want to play, and build that team with what you need. So like for me, I like one bigger center back that can win the aerial battles and is more as my ball winner. But then I like a smaller center back that balances the game, or not even a smaller one, but like a center back that balances the game properly. And I think when you go out and see these players for like the U.S. national team in different leagues, you have to see what their skill set is, what they're strong at, and see how it fits into your identity. I always use Mike Grella, one of my best friends, as an example. Mike Grella is another one of the top players I played with, and all his career he played winger. But when I grew up with him, he was probably one of the best number 10s that you could ever find, that could play in between those pockets, between the midfield and the opposing team's midfield and defensive line. And even if you talk to his teammates, like his Red Bull teammates or his lead teammates, they would say whenever he was put in there, it was just so dangerous. He was at another level, but we only saw him as a winger in MLS or at Leeds. You know what I mean? So it's like you have to have an identity and know where you're going to put the players and make it work, I hope that answered it. Was that kind of?
It helps. I think one of the trickiest areas, and areas maybe where, in my opinion, the U.S. is the furthest behind, is the science. It's both art and science of high-level talent identification and sort of cultivation, right?
Let me ask you guys a question, though. Don't you think, like, even college or USDA, like, all the coaches go to the same tournaments and the same college showcases? Like, do you agree with that stuff? Because for me, like, that holds these events, and there's all different levels of players, and gets to work with international scouts and stuff. Like, these guys go to like 4th division Spanish games, or like I had a scout from Denmark at a 4th division Portuguese game with me. And like, why don't we go look at other tournaments or other colleges and lower levels? Why do we only go, like, all the college coaches go to the same tournaments, all the USDA or MLS scouts go to the same, like, how come? Like, why do we do that?
I'll bet everybody in this room I'm in has a experienced take on that. My answer is that this is one of the core questions of American soccer right now. Chris and I were sitting in a New Jersey hotel room at some ECNL ID event, like, I don't know, 8 years ago, where this U.S. soccer scout was like, look, I know there's this narrative that there's all these diamonds in the rough, these kids in Latino leagues, and nobody sees them, and they could be national team players. I'm telling you, the net is bigger. We're not missing that many guys. And then I have other people that have a fundamentally different experience, right? Who feel like, yeah, you've grown the net, but it's still way too small. And I think this is one of the core questions that sort of defines your whole approach to the whole game right now.
Yeah, no, I get that. No, it's opinions, right? Like it's always opinions.
I'm that guy that's banging the drum because I grew up in Texas with this thriving Latino culture that's often that's deeply in love with and entwined with soccer, but is like off the radar of so much of what we do officially from a federation or league perspective. So I'm probably closer to your line of thinking, but again, I have had these spirited debates with lots of people in lots of different situations.
I think part of it, too, is just that's what we've grown up with. The scouts before, the scouts that are now, grew up going to those tournaments. They go to those tournaments because it's economical,
it's easier.
because they have the chance to see 400 kids in a weekend, because they have the chance to network. They don't have to go to 3 different places that are all 4 hours away from each other in one weekend. And so everything's right there for them, and that's what they grow up knowing. That's what they were told to do growing up. And so to break that mold, to go watch a game in a park where a lot of times you hear that, Brazilian players, European players were found on the street. Well, it's got to be tough thinking, well, I could go here where there are 400 kids playing in the next 5 hours, or I could go to a park in an off chance that I do catch a diamond in the rough. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that those are probably some of the reasons for it.
Yeah, I agree. I just think we're so spoiled, and people say, well, what about the kids that can't pay? No, let me tell you something. They find a way to play. The team, the top youth clubs around, if there's a kid who can't pay to play, I guarantee he's on the roster. It's just we don't have that hunger to go out and find something different, or we're scared to change, in my opinion. Again, I always say, all my events, I say it's a game of opinions, but that's just.
Let me ask you this: what is your informal network like? And I know I'm not asking you to give away your secrets, or give us the recipe for free. But
we want emails and phone numbers.
I know that, but that's the thing. I mean, like good scouts and connected people find a way to get in on that low level chatter.
You know who's good at it, and I haven't met him, but he's kind of been a big SoccerViza ambassador in terms of the players he's taken and giving, is John Harkes. Nate Kish, who coaches at DC United and coached at FC Cincinnati, me and him have become really close over the years through the combines and stuff, and we share things about how we think U.S. soccer is going. He's just a great guy, and he's so open to the underdogs of the sport. And Nate found Aaron Walker at a combine, brought him to John Harkes' attention, and John Harkes took him seriously. And in the past, what I've realized is, come to our invitation only. He's good, but it's just kind of a favor. And John Harkes did the opposite. He's like, no, we got to take this guy seriously. And now he's the captain of Greenville, where John Harkes coaches. So that's one guy. I hope, and I think he fights the good fight. Again, I never met him, but when I read his tweets or when I read stories about him, I feel like he's trying to do something so different. You know what I mean?
Awesome.
So that's one of the guys I would say. Nate Kish from DC United's another one. And those are the two that really stand out.
Hey, Joe, this is Chris Hummer. Yeah, we've had Nate on the show, actually. So
Nate's the best. He's the best.
So, I think just to finish one of Charlie's points and what you were talking about, I don't think the size of the net is the issue. It's about the judgments being made about the kids that are being seen. It's not whether the kids are getting an opportunity, but like you were saying, it's a matter of opinion.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
it's a game of opinion. So
just kind of along that lines, and we'll have to get you connected with John. John's from our area here, but I guess he's living down in Carolinas now. But he'd be a great guest as well.
Chris has some good dirt, right? You know some of John's secrets. You guys used to be neighbors up there in Nova.
Yeah, I've been to a few parties, a couple bottles.
What do you guys think of him? I mean, he's different, right? I mean, he seems like he's got he goes to a different beat of a different drum.
He absolutely does. John's never been afraid to give his opinion, and that's one of the things that's really needed. And I think he knows what he believes, and he knows what he wants out of what he sees. So yeah, it's always refreshing and fun to have a conversation with him.
He's been a player in the system, a coach in the system, and now he's a parent in the system. So he's seeing a lot of different views of the game.
Yeah, 2 kids, Division I athletes, 1 pro, right, so far. So, for sure. So, Joe, kind of along this lines, one of the things I keep talking to people about, or I think is the coming change. Do you have any? What's your perception, or do you have some hard knowledge around the solidarity payments and development compensation? Is that landscape changing in the U.S. beyond just MLS clubs? Do you know for a fact how a youth
No,
club?
I don't know. I mean, you hear all these things and you read all these forums and you hear people in the industry that are connected at the higher level talking about it. I don't know. I just feel like it's such a jungle that it might happen, but there's got to be a lot of structure before that can happen. Do I think it's the right route? Yes. Now, why? Because it is a business. I hate when people say it's not a business. Like if Benfica or Manchester United or all these top clubs, or even the lower clubs you don't hear about in Iceland and Slovenia, and if they're not selling players, their club doesn't grow, you know? And I think it needs to be in place here where like even SoccerViza FC, if New York FC wants one of my players, and there's rules to it, I don't think it's just black and white that they have to pay me, but if I have a player in my system from 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, let's say, and I create an environment where this kid's really getting good and my environment's different, that's my skill set. That's what I'm good at, is creating that environment that made this player, or helped, not made, but helped this player get to the next level. I feel that you should get compensated for that because that's how everywhere else in the world does it. You know what I mean? And it regulated, which I don't know how to regulate it. That wouldn't be my thing. But if you do it properly, and whatever that way is, it susses out all the clubs that don't know how to develop players, if that makes sense, or could suss out. You know what I mean?
Totally agree. That's why I like it, because the model of a successful professional player is dramatically different than the model of a successful collegiate player in the United States. And I think that's
100%. Yeah, hit that, man. And like the other part is like MLS is a great business. What a great business. I mean, they're not losing money. Every team is doing okay financially for the most part. They're growing. Now, all the other leagues in the world, the teams are their own company, right? Like they're their own identity. Like MLS is, if you're in the MLS, it's a great business because Red Bull belongs to the MLS. But Man City doesn't belong to the EPL. They're a team that plays within the EPL. So I think that's another thing we have to look at. MLS has done a great job being a business, but it hurts soccer because these owners who invested so much money into being a club don't want to lose that money, so they can't do relegation and promotion. I get it, right? Because I'm a business owner. But at the same time, it hurts the landscape and the system of U.S. soccer. You know what I mean?
For sure. And going along the theme of pro clubs overseas, I wanted to just generally get back to some SoccerViza stuff and ask for your advice to parents or the teenagers themselves who are perhaps interested in finding out if they are pro quality, but they're sort of anecdotally or just urban legend concerned about NCAA eligibility. And as a follow up, from all the players you've helped, what is the earning possibility for somebody to pop overseas and get a lower division contract when they're trying to measure that against a possible college scholarship?
Yeah, so I always say you have to look at, if you want to be a professional soccer player, look at it as understanding you're going to have to start in the mailroom unless you're a big name. I always say that. And you have to go out and prove or find a way or network a way through your career to increase in pay. I mean, my first contract that I actually got paid for was in Iceland for like 300 euros a month after I left Real Maryland. And then I went on to make about 7,000 a month later in my career, but that took a lot of years and a lot of work. So I think players have to be educated on different leagues, meaning different earnings, different levels. Like, just because you're a professional doesn't mean the level is amazing. I take one of the players that Visa Management represents in a country. I don't want to name the country, but the level is not the best. I mean, the level is not the best, but they're getting paid $20,000 a month. He's getting paid $20,000 or $30,000, $40,000 a month, and because the club has money, you know what I mean? But he also has a really good CV. So if I could educate parents or players, listen, you go to college, you play soccer in college to get an education. That's the truth. Mm-hmm. I get it. A lot of people don't see it that way, but the reality is, if you really break it down, you're going there to get a degree in education. So if you're trying to be a professional soccer player, understand that if you pop over to Iceland, for example, it's a great place to use as a platform to get to a higher level, but it's not easy, and you're going to make anywhere from 500 to 3,000 euros a month. bus housing and food paid for. So, but you have to be dedicated. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to try this, and then after a year or two not do it, because it kind of it messes things up. How do I say it? You kind of got to do your homework on what leagues and what the pay is like, and what kind of your roadmap you want your roadmap to look like.
And I can attest to this because I've actually been to one of Joe's combines that he had out in San Diego.
How'd you do? Did you get scouted?
No, he kicked me out before I could even get on the field. But the one thing that
Rotund.
I really loved was the fact that after the first field session, there's still the whole weekend ahead, and Joe took everyone into a room, and he stood up there and he told them, first of all, look, we're not all Cristiano Ronaldo. You're not going to get the millions of dollars. You're not going to have the lifestyle that you see on Instagram. It's an absolute grind. It is something that you have to fight and scrape and work for, sometimes for free for a long time. There's a lot of sweat equity that goes into this. It's
100%.
not as glorious as it looks. And then he proceeded to tell them, here's all the mistakes I made. I didn't do my homework. Make sure that you do your homework. Make sure that you know what you're getting into. And then pretty much it's those players that came out of that conference room and actually went back onto the field that Joe knew these are the players kind of worth watching. And so that was something, that I was really impressed by. Is you get a look, especially in our lives these days with Twitter and Instagram, and everybody's lives look glamorous. I mean, unless you're the top of the top, the life of a soccer player isn't always that glamorous. And Joe definitely tells that to the people who come to him, and they can then go on and make more informed decisions. One of the things I wanted to ask you is, and you've alluded to it a little bit, obviously coaching in Iceland, playing at the top level in the Nordic countries. What are those countries getting right with their youth setups where maybe the U.S. is missing the boat a bit? Or is there anything that we can learn from perhaps the like of Sweden and Denmark, which have had some considerable success on the world stage?
It's the culture, guys. Like, I have a top kid here at my club who's really good. Let's say he's 12 years old, and he's really, really good, and he can be something. But his mom and dad are wearing New York Rangers or Giants hats and never even kicked a soccer ball, so they don't know what route he should go. And if I say, hey, little Johnny is good, like, he is good. If he focuses on soccer, he could be something one day, but he plays baseball, lacrosse, and misses practice. Like, it's the culture, and that's just one example. But there's so many examples that other countries, like in other countries, it's the main sport. They live it, they breathe it. It's more important than family on some occasions. It's crazy. But here we have a culture of so many years of just soccer being soccer. Like, let's go play soccer. Like, my math teacher would be like, hey, did you bring your skirt today for soccer practice? And that culture still exists. Like, soccer's more of a cardio sport. Like, if I walk down the sideline of my youth team's games, I don't see a Manchester United. I mean, you see it more now, but you don't see a Manchester United hat. You don't see a Chelsea hat, a Benfica hat. You do in some clubs, but the majority of the time you walk down that sideline as a director and you talk to someone about soccer, and they couldn't tell you who Thierry Henry was. And that's a big problem here because it's just the culture is so much different. In Iceland, for example, those kids want to be pro footballers. They're training every day. Iceland's doing everything to give those players a real opportunity to be seen. But most importantly, those players want it more than anything. And their parents' first love is usually that sport. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And that's really funny because the topic that we're actually going to speak about once we conclude with you is the professionalization of U.S. soccer. And so all the people will come and complain, oh, well, these kids, they go into the development academy and they don't get the chance to play high school and they don't get the chance to go play baseball and play basketball. And my first thought is, yeah, well, A, that's their choice. And B, if they want to be pros, that's what they have to do. And yet, so everything you just said is sometimes what everybody complains about when the U.S. does try and do that with soccer. I mean, what do you say to those detractors who say, oh, well, this kid is missing out on all these experiences, and in the end, it's actually going to make him a worse soccer player because he's going to be burned out or he won't have enough experiences?
I'm gonna say it's a game of opinions, but in life, in life, if you want to be good at something, you got to dedicate yourself to it. And that's the truth. Like, my company's grown a lot in the last few years, but I haven't had a life for a lot of those years because I had to focus on this. And people are like, how did you get there, but you didn't play at the highest level, and your other friends are. I just focused my energy on this, and I think I'll give you an example. There's a kid right now in the program. He's playing for our U16 team. What a player he is. I brought him to a European club about 3 years ago, and they liked him. So I've been in contact with a couple of European clubs because he has a European passport. And this year, I was like, well, I'm going to send him somewhere big, like whether it be Rangers, whether it be team in Portugal. I'm going to send him somewhere to really get evaluated to give this guy a chance. So I told his dad that. And his dad said, okay, so I put him on my best U16 team here. He was very talented, a lot of good players here. And I said to him, okay, listen, he has everything to possibly play professionally. Is that what you guys want? Yeah, Joe, that's exactly what we want, 100%. Okay, cool. So the coach of the U16 team calls me, and I haven't had a chance because our combine and our high school teams just started training, so he's come back from high school. And he's missed every practice. And I said, what do you mean he's missed every practice? Well, his dad called me and said he's decided he has to take basketball really seriously this year. Okay, sounds good. So I called the dad and I go, hey, what's going on? You know, what are we doing here? I need him to go to Europe. Possibly. We talked about him going in February and March to train with the top team. Yeah. He's off for that. Well, he's missing every practice. Well, yeah, he's got to play basketball. Like, he has to. Or is he not going to play basketball? Now, again, game of opinions. In my opinion, he's not going to touch a soccer ball at all, and I'm going to send him to a pro team this winter. Do you see that? It's crazy. It's crazy. That's just the culture here.
Oof.
It drives me crazy. He has all the tools to be something like but, you know, that's just the culture. And I can't make him drink that water. You know, then I'm wrong because they have, and that's, I say that a lot. Like, a lot of the directors in the area, we've grown in 2 years to have, we started the youth club 2 years ago, and we only had 3 teams, and now we're up to 20 teams. And a lot of directors come to me from other clubs in the area and ask my opinion. And I always say, like, just create a good environment, but do not try to make them professionals. They got to want to be pros, or they got to want to be top prospects or top whatever. You can only create an environment and help them as much as you can, but they're the ones who actually have to drink the water. You know what I mean?
So with that said, what are your thoughts on the DA?
I think they're trying to do something good. I just don't get it. Like, U.S. Soccer, why do you think the FA goes to Manchester City or Manchester United and tells them how to run their youth club, or tells their youth director you have to play a 4-3-3 and do these type of principles and do these type of things? No, because the game's creative. Different coaches have different styles, and they have to be creative. Here, you can go watch a DA match. They're both playing a 4-3-3, trying to do the exact same things. Where's the creative side to it? You know what I mean? So if I in a perfect world, if I was the U.S. soccer president, I would say, okay, we have to have guidelines and rules for the way the league's set up. But us, as an organization for scouting for our national teams, has to step away from USDA and go find coaches and players that are really going to take us to the next level. Let's not just create a beehive and pick who we think the best bees are. Let's go to different places and really do the hard work, because we live in a country where hard work gets you to where you need to be. Like, we're hard workers, and let's go find this next level of players. You know what I mean? And it's easier said than done, but that's the work I would try to put in.
Joe, I can almost hear some of my good friends at the Federation saying nobody's been telling them to play a 4-3-3 for 6 years. Tony Laporte hasn't been directly involved, and I'm just like, well, if people are still talking about it, that should tell you how crazy it made coaches, some of the biggest coaches in the country. You can't play 3-5-2. You just won a national championship. We need you to shift away from that 3-5-2.
But isn't it creative? Like, you probably have a style or who your favorite player is, and that's what makes soccer so awesome. Like, the Italians play really defensive. The Germans are machines. The English, they have no patience. They want to get forward. There's so many different styles, and I think we as a country here in America have all these different cultures. Let us be creative, and you as U.S. Soccer, go find who does a really good job at it. You know what I mean? Instead of saying, this is how you have to do it, or these are they don't really say that, but everyone's a robot, and kind of does it that way.
Joe, we can't thank you enough for your time. This has been awesome.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it. Before we let you go, can you tell us where we can find you, not only for SoccerViza, but just also on social media and all the proper outlets to learn a little bit more about you or to interact with you and to learn more about SoccerViza as well?
Yes, no worries. So Instagram, social media, all those handles for our company is SoccerViza, so just with a Z, so soccer, and then Visa with a Z, not an S. And then I'm just Joe Funicello on Twitter and Instagram, place like that. So, guys, thank you so much for having me on and hearing my opinion in the game. I really appreciate it.
It was an absolute blast. Thank you again, Joe Funicello, for our wonderful producer, Bridget Baker, for SoccerWire founder Chris Hummer, SoccerWire managing editor Quinn Casteel, and the man who is so great and glorified that he doesn't even need a title, Charles Bohm. I'm Marc Serber saying thank you so much for tuning in to the SoccerWire podcast.